we're going to be discussing the 12 factors with Jeff McGovern, Big Secrets of Pest Management, all on this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek Podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez. Hey, happy Monday to you all. Hope you guys had a great weekend. You had a great week. Hope the heat is not beating you up too bad. It is pretty hot out there, guys. Stay hydrated. Drink some Gatorade. And try to stay cool as much as you can because it is scorching hot. I don't care where you go. There's no getting out from this heat. I was in a garden doing an initial service for a brand new client, and we were there probably 5 hours in that landscape initiating a service. This is a pretty large landscape, and that's how long it takes. And let me tell you, I was taking breaks like every 30 minutes, turning on the van, getting AC for about 5 minutes and cooling off. And I'm drinking about a gallon of water a day right now, being out in the field. So it is a scorcher. But I'd like to thank some people for listening to this podcast. Susan Broadbent at Bug Education. She also has a website called bugsfordinner.com. That's right, folks. It's in, I think it's the in thing right now. Edible bugs are the in thing, and especially crickets. The good thing is they're higher in protein and lower in fat than meat. So next time, you get home and, honey, what's for dinner? Crickets. That's for dinner. So, it's getting big. I don't know. This is the second one this week that's following me that sells edible bugs. So I think it's pretty cool, though. Check it out. She's got a pretty cool website. Also, I want to thank Luke E. Hall, president of Certified Pest Control of Naples, LLC. He also gave us a review on Facebook this last week, and it says, this podcast is very helpful. I find it to be supplemental to my CEUs, textbooks, readings, and current informative newsletter from the University of Florida. I love that newsletter. That is an awesome newsletter if you're in Florida. UF does a great work at putting out good information. It says, keep up the great work. You can give them some love on Facebook. I got a link. Hey, man, just, give the guy some love and give him some likes and stuff like that because, help each other out. Also, I've been on Pest Cemetery on Facebook, and let me tell you something. There are some really, really talented people on that community. If you want to get plugged into a community that helps each other out, gives each other tips and discusses a lot of things, Pest Cemetery is doing, Jerry's doing a great job with that, and get hooked into that one because it's great for pest control professionals to be hooked up there. So give him props for that. On the pest alerts, hey, there's a great article in Entomology today. I mean, I am a L&O guy. I love L&O. I like GHP, don't get me wrong, but I love L&O. So anything that has to do with L&O, I love it. And this is a great article on hemlock woolly algids. I always have problem with that pronunciation. But hitchhiking on birds and how it's being spread all over from the north down to the south by migratory birds, and they're falling on birds and they're doing testing. And it's a great article that came out in Entomology today. Really good writing on it. And it came from an actual scientific article, experimental evidence for branch to bird transfer as mechanisms from avian dispersal of the hemlock woolly algid, and it's a Hemiptera pest. Check both out. Really cool articles on what's going on with that, and you can keep informed. If you're dealing with hemlocks in your part of the world, you will probably have problems if you have customers that have on commercial properties or residential properties and have hemlocks, how you're going to be dealing with that. In the news, there's a company, Active Environment, is suing the city of Macedonia because of the ordinance that forbids door-to-door sales in Macedonia, Ohio, claiming the ordinance is unconstitutional because it violates the free speech and due process rights. There's an article that is where the lawsuit was placed, and you can get a copy of that lawsuit and check it out. I think it's going to be vital to keep your eye on that because a lot of companies have done very well with door-to-door sales, even though it is very controversial because nobody likes people knocking on their doors. It is frowned upon in a lot of places. Here in South Florida, we have a lot of places. It is very expensive for us to do because we have to do a lot of direct marketing. We deal with very gated communities, high-end residential, and you cannot knock on doors. You can't hand out flyers. In one city that we're in, there is a zero tolerance for handing out flyers. You can't put flyers on people's cars or their doors. It is a clean city, and you will get fined $100 if you get caught handing out flyers in that city. So very difficult to do business there. That's why the prices are very high to acquire a clientele there. Very expensive to acquire clients. And a lot of companies like Altera out in the West made a very big company by hiring and creating a very, very, very aggressive, door-to-door sales force to sell a lot of their products. And this is one of those things where, a lot of people do it, and it's getting harder to do as time passes. But I still think if you're in the right neighborhood and you're in the right community and you do it the right way and you respect the laws and you respect people's privacy, if you got a sign on the door that says no soliciting, don't knock on their door. If you're in a neighborhood and somebody says, hey, you can't be knocking in this neighborhood, didn't you read the no soliciting sign? No, sir, I didn't. No, ma'am, I didn't. I'm sorry. And you move on and you leave the neighborhood and you do as you're told. Don't wait for them to call the cops, become belligerent, and things like that, where you become antagonistic to something, to their rules. I mean, obey the rules, obey the policies. If you get asked not to knock on their door anymore, don't knock on their door anymore. Very simple. So again, it's one of those things. It's part of the business world, and it's kind of like telemarketing, and you're not supposed to telemarket if you're on a no-call list, and people violate that list all the time. So I'm on both the national and the state one, and I still get telemarketed, 3, 4, 5 times a day. So it doesn't really matter. In the news, Rollins also reported second quarter in 6 months of 2016, their financial results. The second quarter revenues, $411 million, and a net income increased to 6% to $47.8 million. So they're on a 6% profit margin, which is, pretty good for a large company, actually, to have that kind of profit margin in the second quarter. I don't think it helps us much to know that they made $411 million next to our measly maybe million. But, it is what it is, and they put it out there, and it helps you kind of see where you're at. So if you're doing better than 6%, kudos to you for producing better than a 6% profit margin, although that is pretty impressive in this economy for a company to do that, and you got to acknowledge that. I don't know what it is that they're doing, but they must be doing something right, even though you get the thousands and thousands of reviews that you see where people are upset. But when you're doing that much volume, you're going to have that many more problems. And it's just part of the business. On our main topic, I got Jeff McGovern on the phone. We've had a couple of good conversations. Very bright man who I really enjoy talking to, who's confirmed a lot of the things that we have been doing, and that we're on the right track. And I think it's vital that if you're listening to, take notes, listen to this, check out his website, follow him. Really, really impressed. He's been doing this longer than I've almost been alive. So very, very impressed. And thank you for being on the podcast. And let's have a conversation with Jeff. How you doing, Jeff?
Frank, I'm doing just fine. It's a wonderful day here in Florida. I wish it was a little cooler, but that's the price we pay so we can call our relatives up north at Christmas.
Yeah, no, it's a scorcher, man. I'm trying to figure it out this year. It's just unbelievable how hot it is. But hey, it's better than, it's kind of like anything in the world. You get either, if you're on the West Coast, you're constantly getting hit with earthquakes. If you're up north, you get the snow winds, and down here we get hurricanes and hot weather. So, I guess there is no real perfect place to live in.
No, there is no perfect place, but the ideal way to do it is eventually make enough of an income so you can simply have a house in the ideal climate, like you'd need 4 or 5 of them, and just move around the country the whole year.
There you go. I'm working on that plan.
That's the best plan.
It's my 20-year plan right now. So we'll see what happens. We'll talk about it in 20 and see how's it going. So I wanted to introduce you to the audience because I don't know how many people actually know of you. But tell us a little bit about you and, what you've done in the industry and what you're all about.
Well, first of all, the name's Jeff McGovern, and I've been involved in the pest control industry since the early to mid 1970s. And I was one of those folks that thought, I think I'll do this until I get a real job. and here it is just a few years later, and I'm still trying to figure out that job thing.
Yeah, it's a bug. You catch a bug while you're in the bug business, and then you can't leave.
Absolutely. That's exactly what happened to me. And, it's a funny thing because I'll never forget my first job that I was hired by a national company was in late 1975 because I'd been with a smaller firm before that. But in late 1975, I got hired by a national company as a manager trainee. And the way that worked back in those days was they would tell the person running that branch office, go out and hire somebody that's young and impressionable and has no clue what's going on, call them a manager trainee, and then we use them to crawl under all the nasty houses. And there were so many, there I was crawling under I'd be, like 6 inches in the mud, crawling around under some nasty crawl space where the dog was living part-time. And the guys who were in charge were leaning down, looking through the vent openings going, go a little to the left and tell us what you see. Yeah. that was a manager trainee's job in the 1970s.
Jeez. And so where was this that you were first working? It
was up in Indiana.
Okay.
In a city called Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay.
From there it was just a matter of, over the years, moves occurred, opportunities occurred, and that's, you move around the country. And I've worked, because of the things I've done in the industry, I've worked literally across the United States, Canada, down into Mexico, Puerto Rico, down in some of the other islands, down in the Southeast Asia. I've kind of been all over.
Wow. Okay. So you are in 1975. So I was getting out of diapers because I was born in 70. Okay. So I think I had my tonsils out when I was 3. So yeah, I'm not even in preschool yet. And you're already dealing with pests. So yeah. You've been doing it a while.
It wasn't bad. And the thing is, I've never really left the field because I like operating in the field because that's where the action really is.
Right.
And so even though I've had a lot of opportunities to sit through classes and go to programs and such literally across the country and in some cases in other countries, so you never stop learning.
Right.
But I love the fact that we can go out in the field and still make a difference because, frankly, the rats, mice, roaches, and all those bits of excess livestock and critters, they haven't changed much in all those years because that's just a blink in time. To us, it sounds like a long time. But the pests are still here. They're still doing things. And so it's always been interesting. And, the coolest thing about this industry and the way you can get ahead very quickly is to look in the mirror every morning and say to yourself, looking at yourself in the eye, I don't know everything and I never will. So I'm never afraid to ask for help or ask a question.
Yeah,
that's how you get ahead.
Yeah, it's constant with the changes and things going on that I am just shocked at how little I know about the pest control industry, and I've been in it now only 10 years, and how little I know, how I talk to people from all over the country with their different pests that they're struggling with, and I say, how can I make a difference? How can I influence? How can I help? Because everybody is, and there's a lot of people who are struggling. in this industry right now,
yes.
and learning and trying to learn, and even in the age of information, which is always what I say, in the age of information, we have such amount of still of ignorance of what's going on in our industry. And I try to bring to the program something that will inspire people, something that will get them to think, something that will get them to learn something new every time they listen to this, that that will impact them and help them grow daily, or at least weekly. Let me ask you this, because you said you were in Indiana. Now, have you been you been to Purdue, the university? Because they have one of the best, I think, programs, I think, as far as training goes for pest control people. Tell me what your experience been in looking at that.
I believe this coming year at Purdue will be my 34th or 35th attendance at Purdue.
Okay, wow, okay.
I mean, I've attended that conference on and off over the years, and depending upon, meetings and schedules of where I was, that's a meeting I always try to make. But, we're good friends with a lot of the people at Purdue. And so, I first went there for the initial certification classes when Indiana was just getting started with that process in the 70s. And we had to go in and take classes and take tests right alongside the farmers that were handling pesticides.
Yeah,
and in those days, those programs were brand new as far as certification.
Right, because back then in those programs, really urban entomology was not a big thing. It was mostly still agricultural. The most of the entomology.
Well, that's very true. We had in my classes that I took for my initial certification, we had portions of those classes in the core event where you had to learn how to spray a field of beans or corn and know what the rate of travel of the tractor was, what the output of the nozzles were. I mean, that's part of what we had to learn in order to get past the certification exams in Indiana, although I think it's probably different now.
Yeah. How many fields of beans have you sprayed since then?
Actually, I never really sprayed bean fields, although I know how to drive a tractor. I've ridden on them before.
Right.
But, we did a lot of pest control work when I was in high school, but we were using rifles against woodchucks back then. The farmers loved us for that.
Let me ask you, so were you there when Austin Frischman was teaching there?
I'd have to remember because I know Doc pretty well. And I'm not sure if Doc was there at the time, because the first time I went to a Purdue event would have been like 75, 76 in there. And I'm not sure if Doc was there. Now, Bennett was there because I've known Gary Bennett for years, and he's the head of the urban entomology department. At that time, Bobby Corrigan was still there as an instructor.
Yes. Okay, I've heard of
because
him.
Bobby was handling, at that time, Bobby was the one really handling the Purdue conference as such.
Gotcha.
So, but a lot of these guys, I've known them for a number of years, and we see each other periodically.
Yeah, because he's in our neck of the woods now.
I don't think Doc was there.
Okay, because he's in our neck of the woods now too. He lives down here in Florida, and
right, he's in Boca.
Yeah, I see him. I get to see him every year at least, and
because I'll see Doc in about 2 weeks.
Okay, so when you see him, put in a good word for the podcast that I would love to have him on. Okay,
we'll see what he says.
I just baited you on that. If I can get him to come on, I would be so tickled.
The thing is, you have with Doc, you have to remember something. This man has really seen the industry far longer than a lot of people that are still in it and still active.
Yes.
And his perspective is very, very unique because Doc can still step back and see what's really happening. And the advice that he offers is extremely sage advice if you'll pay attention to him.
Yes.
And he taught me so much with very, very simple things.
Yes.
And I'll give you one of those simple things right now that I use in all the classes I teach. We talk about it in the 12 key factors that we'll chat about in a minute. But that's something that Doc taught me, it's probably 30 some odd years ago now. And I call it the question. And what that question is, when you're working with a client, be it a homeowner or a commercial restaurant or something like that, the question is, where was the last place you saw? And then fill in the blank of the pest that's appropriate. So in other words, in a cockroach situation, where was the last place you saw a roach? And the reason for the question being phrased in that fashion is you want to create a partnership with your client. Because if you ask them, where are the roaches at? They're going to tell you they're everywhere. And everywhere doesn't work very well because you can't be everywhere either. But if you ask the client, where was the last place you saw a roach? You'll see them think about it for a moment. They'll say something to you. Maybe they'll say, I saw it back by the dish ring in this commercial restaurant. Oh, I saw it in the kitchen by the refrigerator. What you do then is you look them in the eye and say, show me. Because at the moment in time where you turn with that client and make that little adventure, you now have married them. You have a partner. And partnerships are very difficult to break. And I've seen, over the years, I've worked with big companies, small companies, residential accounts, all types of clients. If you can create that partnership from day one, a marriage is hard to break. And you have to understand that marriages go through ups and downs. That's normal. But if you start the conversation out with communication and you always remember to communicate no matter what, you'll keep that client. You won't lose them.
Right.
No, that's why the question is so important.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. What is it that you do? Because I know that you or represent or deal with some big brands out there that are manufacturers and things like that. What is it that you do now?
Well, what we do is we have a consulting business called The Resource Shop. And that's my wife and I, my wife, Kate. And I think our website might be Jeff McGovern. And my nickname for years was either the Pest Coach or Gadget, depending upon, what you needed from me at the time. But what I try and do is work with these firms and help them get into our industry more effectively. And I like to point pest control operators to equipment, systems, and technology that works for them, and also to do that same type of training for them as well as the client base. Because I've done my classes for great big companies that use pest control services. I've done them for big pest control companies. I've done them for management companies. And the 12 key factors in particular is a training process that causes partnerships to be born. That's why I teach it. Because if you go to some of the websites internally for some very large, for example, U.S. retail companies, you're going to find the 12 key factors on there. That helps them understand pest situations in their business. Also, if you talk to some of the folks within the state of Florida that are with the health department, some of them are also very well versed in the 12 key factors because I've given classes for some of them as well over the years.
Okay. So the 12 key factors is not just taught to pest control people that are doing the work, but also educating the client on how to properly work with a pest control company then to get the results they want. Is that?
It brings understanding.
Okay.
That's what it's really is, bring understanding and help make the situation more manageable, because a lot of this, as I said a little while ago, is the formation of partnerships. If you're not partnering with a client, you're not communicating with them, if that happens, you're going to lose them. Because I go in situations where I'm sitting with a client and they're frustrated. They own a restaurant. They own some type of a business. And I'm looking at service records where they've hired and fired pest control companies every year for 25 years.
Right.
They keep switching them out. And the reason they keep switching them out, the number one reason is they weren't communicating with them.
Okay. Yeah, and that's constant that I see where, I see that constantly down here where we're getting calls from restaurants, business, commercial, whatever, that they're not getting control. They don't know why they're not getting control. I every time I do, I consult them on this simple factor: is what are they doing? What have they done? And most of the time, I hear they just come in once a month, or they come in twice a month and they spray. That's what I hear 90% of the time. And I said, that's why you're having a problem. And that's and a lot of the time when I consult the client, what I found is they're in that vicious cycle of making the same decisions based on the same information, thinking that if they just fire that company, they get another company that sprays the same product, they're going to get a different result. And that's what I see.
It's almost like And you're right, because it's almost when I read the paperwork, I have to look at the client and I say, well, did this guy say he was going to spray harder than the last one? or the old routine, routine if he's going to use stronger stuff.
Yes.
I mean, that's and the thing about the stronger stuff, and what was the old saying for that? Oh yes, exterminator proven ingredient. We were all grilled on that in watching television as children, seeing the old advertisements for pesticides on TV. And there's a lot of subtlety there that psychologically probably affected the customer base in ways we don't understand. But if you watch those old pesticide ads on television, you'll see the housewife or the individual standing there horribly upset, frustrated. They have roaches, they have ants, their home has been invaded. And yet then the pesticide is produced, the insects in some cases explode or disappear completely, and in the next scene, because of the exterminator-proven ingredients, the house is not only completely free of pests, the housewife now has clean clothes, full makeup, and her hair's done, and the kitchen's immaculate.
Yeah.
So psychologically, those stronger chemicals have caused all these wonderful things to occur. Not only have the roaches left, the cleaning companies come in and completely redone your house.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see that constantly, and it's coaching them on a lot of the things that we're going to discuss. I was really, really impressed with this. I was like, man, this is the stuff that I keep talking to my customers on, that it has nothing to do with chemical. 90% of what I have to deal with in that restaurant has nothing to do with chemical. It has to do with
chemical is just a tool.
Yeah, and what they're doing.
All it is a tool.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. How did you come up with 12 key factors and not like 10 or 13?
Well, it's a matter of putting things into bite-sized pieces.
Okay.
And so what I had to figure out with this, and I wrote the 12 key factors. It probably was the early 1980s when I first put this together. Okay. And it was back in the height of cockroaches. And if you look at the first four, access, food, water, and harborage. Okay. Those are resources. Access, food, water, and harborage. A way in, something to eat, something to drink, and a place to live. Those are resources that anything needs to become a pest, whether it's a cockroach or a rogue cocker spaniel. It's access, food, water, and harborage. If a creature has access and then gets food, water, and harborage, and you don't want it there, it's a pest, right? Right. So it's access, food, water, and harborage as resources. Then the second set of the 12 key factors are where to look for the first four. You have to look underneath, around, behind, and on top of. This is where a pest control operator has to be trained in observation, where to look for these things. And sometimes they're really tiny. And so over time, an individual becomes far better at spotting problems because their eyes get better. They become more attuned to what the pests are doing. Maybe they've had some entomological training, and so they have an idea of where these things would be most comfortably accessing a structure. That's why so you've got the resources, then where to look, and the final four items of the 12 key factors are cleaning, sanitation, maintenance, and product rotation. Notice I did not say spray, fog, bomb, bait, trap, or fumigate. Those are tools. But cleaning, sanitation, and product rotation is how you solve pest problems.
Okay, so let's go start out in the beginning, because this is what I do. I'm going to tell you what I do, and then you tell me if I'm doing the right thing based on my experience, and we'll use me as a case. And then that way you can kind of help guide me through the process. So I get a call from a restaurant, and I start asking, what have they done and what have they been doing? And then I'll go in, and if the customer, once I've qualified them on the phone and I did my sales presentation, all this, then we got it scheduled to go out and look at the facility. And immediately what I look for is, first of all, those rear doors in a restaurant, the rear doors. 90% of them don't have seals or thresholds or anything. Half of them are open all the time. And they're complaining about how they got roaches and flies and rodents coming in. So I start talking to them about, this is what they immediately want to know, what am I going to spray and what am I going to apply and how am I going to do it and how fast can I get rid of the roaches? And I start getting into the conversation about access and about having to seal this and close that. And I get a ton of pushback because they think it's total nonsense what I'm telling them in their mind. And that's the biggest challenge I have with when I go to like drop ceilings and do an inspection in a strip mall and there's access from all over the place where insects and they're not going to be wanting to put any money into. Sometimes when I look up and I say, look, you're going to have to get all this fixed before I can kill the insect once the insect is inside. But do you really want the insect crawling through that door when your customer's here? And they're looking at me like I got a third eye.
Because they've been trained by everybody that preceded you.
Yeah.
That's why.
So our job.
The thing is,
go ahead.
You have to do some retraining on these. When you go into a new account, the first thing you have to remember is the chances of you getting a virgin German cockroach infestation are nil zilch. It probably will never happen in your entire career. In other words, it's a place that already has had pest control service. The chances of getting a hot infestation of German cockroaches nobody else has ever touched probably isn't going to happen. So you're going into a place that's already been beat up on by a lot of other exterminators who thought they were doing exactly the right thing. And your client has been trained by those people that it's got to be stronger, faster, harder, and deeper to try and get them out of there.
Right. Yeah. So 90% of the calls I get.
That's part of it.
Yeah. 90% of the calls I get, they have a German roach infestation that is severe and they have a pest, and they've had 3 pest control companies.
Do you want to, now let me explain something about the way I handle German roaches and what I recommend.
Okay.
We had talked the other day briefly about how back when I started my career in the pest control industry, German roaches were looked upon as with the same level of horror that bed bugs are now. I mean, we were told, don't have cuffs on your uniform pants because little nymphs will get in your cotton. You're going to take them to the next account. Oh, it's going to be terrible. You're going to spread them all over. So it was a lot like we talk about bed bugs now. And one of the things I started doing back at about the time I wrote the 12 Key Factors was trying to figure out where the heck are the roaches? And then, the question that I told you earlier, where was the last place you saw, that I heard from Doc, was a real catalyst for helping me getting started doing this properly. And I put together a process called forced monitoring. And for German cockroaches, it's ideal. The other name for forced monitoring was coined by Dr. Rick Brenner with USDA, because he and I met about the time I was fooling around with my process. He was doing his own. And the government name for the process, instead of forced monitoring, was spatial analysis and precision targeting. And what we were trying to do was to figure out in a given space where the German roaches really are. And when I go in and explain this to a client, even today, I've gone into places in the last 3 weeks and mentioned this process to restaurant owners, and they went, nobody's ever said that before. That is such a cool idea. And what we do using roach traps is figure out what the distribution of roaches is in that facility when it's not stressed by pesticide and treatments and flushing and all that other stuff.
Right.
When I do my training classes, one of the things I talk about, I actually have a picture of training classes on the PowerPoint, and I tell people, keep the flushing here. Don't be flushing in the kitchen. And the reason for that is we want to find out where they really are. Because if you keep pumping chemical in, it's a chemical that causes them to move, you're going to run that population all over the place. And you won't be able to deal with them. You scatter them like crazy. And these are the situations that I see. So the forced monitoring process, we go in with traps. Now, the trap I prefer is a ramped style trap. And that simply means when the roach crawls up toward the glue surface, he has to go up a commitment ramp into the trap, and then he falls onto the glued surface. You get a higher catch rate on a ramped trap. Some of those ramp traps you can also put a food attractant tablet into. That can be helpful at times as well. The one that comes to mind, because I like it because of ease of use, is the ProPest monitor that Oaks has. And you can get that from any of the suppliers in the pest control industry. But in process, what you would do first is visit that restaurant, and you're going to create a map of the restaurant, although they probably already have one for fire escape and that kind of thing. But you want to create a map of the restaurant, and during that initial visit, you're going around doing your investigation. You're doing an assessment and an evaluation. Don't do an inspection, because if you do an inspection, people think it's free, because that's what it says on the side of our trucks. So You do an assessment and an evaluation. In that process, you're asking people, where was the last place you saw? And you're going to ask that to the manager, to the cook, to the guy in the dishwash ring. And you're going to get a distribution that you're going to start seeing a pattern here. Now, the service that I recommend being done, the initial service, instead of going in there and blasting the living daylights out of it, which is what everybody wants to do, you go in with traps, and you go in with those ramped traps, and you can make the traps up ahead of time, which is the other reason I like that ProPest trap, because I can open it up, peel off the release paper, I can put the tablet in it if I want, and then fold it shut, and I put those traps in bundles of 20, already assembled, ready to drop, into a plastic trash bag, little white trash bag. I make bags of traps. And the last time I did one of these at a particular facility, we had a medium-sized restaurant, and we used 5 bags of traps, or 100 traps placed in there. And you can do the trap placement. You want to do it at night after closing, and they're done with their cleaning process. You can do a drop of 100 traps in less than 15, 20 minutes. You just go in there and put them out, because you've already got some idea where things are being seen. The traps are going to help verify. Then what you'll do is let those traps cook overnight. Come in the next morning, and don't worry about looking at them. Just pick them up. Now, as you put out each trap, you're going to number the trap with a Sharpie, drop it or place it, and then you mark that location on the map that you have created. So when you come back the next day, you gather up all your traps. And it won't take that long. Some may be missing. That's fine. But gather all the traps up. I doubt you'll lose any, because nobody's been there messing with them. Take those traps back to the office or to another facility, and one at a time you're going to read them. When you open up the trap, you're going to see insects that are caught. And what you want to do is divide those things into 4 categories. So I make a tally sheet, and mind you, I did this before computers could do it. So I make up a tally sheet, and across the top, it has males, females, females with egg capsules, and nymphs. Those are the 4 categories. And then I usually put 20 traps on a page, so I can just write my numbers in. So what I do is I pick up trap number 40, for example. It doesn't matter where I start, because I've already got the tally sheets made up. I open up trap number 40, and maybe I count 6 males, I count 2 or 3 females, and maybe a dozen nymphs. Now, the beauty of this thing is based on average travel pattern of German cockroaches. Because if you have an adult male German roach, from the point of capture on that trap, the world of that insect is 12 feet in each direction. It's a bubble that expands out from that trap 12 feet in every direction. The female cockroach, her world is about 6 feet in every direction from point of capture. The female with an egg capsule, her world is 1 foot in every direction from point of capture, and the nymph is the same. So if you've picked a trap up and it happens to be in a pass-through alley in a restaurant where there are not any roaches here, the exterminator runs back and forth. That pass-through zone trap has a bunch of nymphs in it. It's within 1 foot of harborage. You missed them. That's the beauty of forced monitoring, and it is every single time I have done this, literally across the United States, every single time it has found the German cockroach populations in the building. It found them. because it usually found them where people were walking right past them. It's an incredibly effective way to find roaches. Now you've got a map showing the distribution of cockroaches. Now you go back in and you do your clean out service. And the first weapon in that clean out service is a vacuum, because you open up that cabinet, there's a cluster of roaches there that, you knew you were close, just suck them up. That's how you battle the cockroaches initially, is with that HEPA vacuum. But see, that's the beauty of the forced monitoring process, which when you expose a client to that, the average pest control client has never heard of that process. And as many times as I've done it around the country. Now, my personal best as far as number of cockroaches caught in one night of trap placement was up in the Northeast, north of New York City a ways, in New England, and I had a site that got over 3,400 cockroaches in one night.
Jeez.
In my traps. And the cool part of it was, when I went back to the facility a couple of days later, I had to meet up with the QA director for the facility. And the first thing out of his mouth was, "What have you done? You put toxic pesticides in my building." And I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Well, the work areas, the people, they didn't see any roaches. They barely nothing. What did you do?" He thought I had sprayed the place. All I'd done was put out the traps. But when you catch 3,400 insects in your traps, you've reduced the population a substantial amount, to the point where people noticed there were less.
Right.
Because those were the most mobile insects. But I've had people come back to me and say that that process, as silly as it sounds, is incredibly effective. But you have to you go into a client with this idea. Now, you talk about green. Other than the fact, I guess somebody could put glue boards all over their body and strangle themselves to death. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything. It's going to pick up a lot of insects.
Right.
It's going to give you huge amounts of information. Now you can be more precise with your pesticide applications, therefore reducing the pesticide load. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, no, that's one of my key pet peeves, is that, why are you putting a pesticide out where, and this is where I find, and this is, maybe you can expound on this, in talking to restaurant owners in particular.
Right.
That they have a pest control company come in and they're baseboard spraying. When I look at 90% of the products that are available for food service, food handling facilities, baseboard spraying in that facility where food is being prepared or will be prepared is not allowed. It's limited on the label to crack and crevice only, which makes me think, is what the heck are they either applying one product every single time that they can use, or they're violating the label?
Chances are they're just doing what they have always done.
Right.
They don't know to change. I mean, they're doing what they always did. Now, when I started in the industry, we had products that if you sprayed them on the baseboard, they'd fall dead off the ceiling. I mean, there was no problem with that. I mean,
yeah.
We had some material that you mix it up in your sprayer and put it out. Yeah, they're going to drop right off the ceiling if you hit them on the baseboard. The baseboard treatment was a guide point. That's all it was. Treat all the baseboards. Well, it was an easy way to train somebody. They just made sure they sprayed all the baseboards.
Right.
I mean, I remember going into residential accounts in the early 1970s as a manager trainee, and I'd walk into a beautiful home up in Indiana, and the little old lady would say, "Oh, you're a new guy. Well, just follow the line." And there was kind of a stain all the way through the house on the carpeting along the baseboard.
Wow.
Probably from years and years and years of applying God knows what. So.
Yeah, no, so I'm always thinking of, how does that pest behave? I talk to a lot of people about pest. I always, if you listen to this podcast on a regular basis, you'll hear me say all the time, pest biology first, pest biology first. Understand how that pest behaves first, and then develop the strategy to control it. Don't just have a blanket strategy to control a pest. And that's been...
Well, every place is different.
Yeah.
Obviously we have a lot of places in the United States right now that are chain restaurants, chain retail stores, and then you can have exactly the same construction separated by just a few miles, and the pest profile is going to be completely different.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I have no.
That's just how it works.
Yeah, I talk. Hold on a second. Talk to me about. We're looking at the access. How to monitor, how to set the food and harborage and water.
I use the example of German cockroaches because I think it's one that most people understand.
Yes.
And, food, water, and harborage, obviously, the cockroaches can anything's a food source for them. They're pretty good omnivores. They can chew on just about anything and get nourishment from it. The water situation, I mean, food and water in a restaurant or a commercial, even at home, is awfully difficult to deal with. So what we have to do is find ways to use the fact that we found food and water areas against them.
Okay.
But it also kind of combines with harborage because we know these creatures like to be tucked away. Cockroaches like that. A lot of insects, that's comfort for them to be tucked away. So when we combat them, we want to apply the interventions we have as close as possible to these, what we think are the harborage zones.
Okay.
So that on the way to and from water, we got them. Because they're not going to live in the water. They can't. But they may have to pass through a wet zone or go someplace to get water. But if we have an intervention that's on their pathway or an intervention in their harborage, we're going to get them. Get them every time.
Yeah, well, the biggest challenges that I find in restaurants down here is they either, and we'll talk about this with the water source. Most of the water source that is left behind when they clean, and they leave puddles on the floor.
There's things they can do. There's things they can do with that too, because if you've got materials in the harborage, they're going to be passing through those initial contact zones to get to that water that's left, and you have them. You got them at that point.
Yeah.
That's why crack and crevice service was so important, because we need to get it into the cracks, but even maybe more importantly into the void areas, because the cracks are just a doorway. We can't see those voids. In many cases, where do those cracks really go? That's why we use those cracks to introduce material in precise amounts back into the void zone. A good example is the use of dust. A good non-repellent dust that isn't going to run the insect out of there, but it's going to lay in wait for insects to try and occupy those zones. We got them. You got them. I mean, they can't escape from that.
Right.
And it's not going to be bothered by, they're not going to wet it down. They're not going to wash it away. And if you use the right kind of dust, even if water is involved, the water just becomes a carrying agent for the toxic material. It'll kill the insect anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm figuring that out with a lot of more use of silica gel dust and using that.
And you've got kind of a choice there. You can use octaborate product. You can use a silicate product.
Right.
I mean, and it depends. You can actually use a combination of both, because you may find that both products are needed in a specific environment in order to give you the best coverage.
So the mixing of 2 or 3 dusts together to get.
And the thing is, the mixing of dust, we tried this a number of years ago. Mm-hmm. You have to be very careful. We don't want to necessarily become tailgate chemists. And that's not a good place for pest control operators to be. I mean, I had a man that trained me he passed away 15 years ago now, but when he was training me back in the 70s, he was a master of the glug process. So many glugs out of this bottle with a couple of glugs out of this bottle and a glug out of this bottle.
Oh.
And then you put in and then you top it off with either dispersol, which is deodorized kerosene, or a water, whichever base you were using. But he was a master at the glug system. And then I think after he got a little more precise, he went to the capful instead of the glug. But that was a different day and time. And for his time, he was a talented, successful pest control guy. Although back then we called them exterminators, and then they became PCOs, pest control operators. And of course, today we're PMPs. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we've gone through an evolution of the tech and the titles that we've given them. But in this case of the access, food, water, and harborage, you almost have to be there. at the right place and right time to see what it is that they're actually doing? Because
not necessarily, because this is where the investigative process is so important.
Okay.
Because access, food, water, and harborage are resources. And that's where the second set of key factors come in, the underneath, around, behind, and on top of.
Okay.
Because after you have, you have to find what they're going to eat, what they're going to drink, and where they are, how they're getting in. You're going to have to find that. But you find that by looking underneath, around, behind, and on top of. And what helps guide you is the information you've gotten from the people that are there all the time. You do those interviews. Where was the last place you saw? And of course, you can even go a little bit more with that. Where was the last place you smelled something that shouldn't be quite right? Where's the last place you heard something that wasn't quite right? I mean, there's a whole set of processes we go into with rodents I can get into later. But what you want to do is look underneath, around, behind, and on top of, based on the notes you already have. So you don't just, because it's so easy without guidance to go into a facility and look in the most common place you should normally find a cockroach. Don't do it. Learn from the people that are there first. Ask them where the last place they saw a roach was. Give you a good example. I got called to a facility in Tampa a number of years ago. Nice restaurant. Got called down there to help the pest control operator, and they were frustrated, and they were nuking the place on a regular basis. And all I did was walk into this restaurant and start walking around asking employees, where was the last place you saw? When I got back to the dish area, there's this old dude working back there with a ponytail, full of tattoos, and he'd been working there for forever as the dishwasher. And I asked him that question. He looked at me and said, well, hey, man, let me show you. And he took me over to the wall, and he pointed at an outlet. And he said, them little roaches running in and out of those holes all the time. Well, that outlet was connected to a conduit system that was connected to the wall because they had rewired the building 10 years before with the conduits outside the walls and power boxes all over the place. Guess where the roaches were living? Throughout the conduit system. Nobody sprayed it. They couldn't. It was electrical. So they kept treating around everything, and the roaches were thriving in that conduit system.
Yeah, I find that.
And the way I found it, I simply was asking my questions, and this was one of the guys I had my notes, and we went ahead and did a force monitoring on it, and we located other areas. But he was one of the key reasons it was so easy to solve. Because we started unscrewing conduit with those plates. And I got pictures of some of them in my presentations. We had trouble getting some of the plates off because the roaches had pretty well glued them in place.
That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad when you run into that.
Yeah. I mean, you open them up. I mean, I've got a picture somewhere when I pulled one of those things off the wall. And I mean, we're talking hundreds of egg capsules came tumbling out.
Oh.
It was unbelievable. It was just packed. And that was the problem. But see, that's why the investigative process is so important. So you've got your resources, you know where to look, underneath, around, behind, and on top of, and you do that with guidance. Because it's hard. You can't do it yourself. You're not there all the time, and you need the observations of the people that work there. But you never want to ask them where the roaches are, because if they tell you everywhere, you can't check everywhere. Right. But if you ask the last place you saw was, you will see a pattern. And then the forced monitoring process helps focus it even more. But see, that's where pest control becomes investigative, and you get a really engaged client base from that. And what I like to do is also offer that client a meeting with their employees. Because, if that's a restaurant, cockroaches are costing those waiters and waitresses tip money.
Right.
It's costing profit off the bottom line when they've got to give a meal away. And what I like to do is have a meeting with everybody and get them all together. And we talk about the 12 key factors. And we talk about how roaches travel in real simple terms. And what you turn them into is a whole building full of allies. Because then you'll have that waitress that says, oh, man, over in booth number 3, I saw a couple of small ones slip under the molding. That is golden information. And that's very helpful in solving the problem. And besides the fact, if you also do residential work, you'll pick up some residential accounts that way, because the people that work there, they may have issues at home and they may be ashamed to say something. Because one place that I often find an awful lot of roaches is where the people that work there store their personal effects during the day. Their purses, their coats, their shoulder bags. So it leads to more work. It makes everybody happier, and it creates the long-term partner. That's why the 12 key factors is so important, because it creates partnerships.
It's one of those things where we're constantly, and that's one of the things that people tell me, you spend too much time with the client. You spend too much time talking to them. I can't, the excuse that I hear now from everybody is, I can't spend that amount of time with every client. And that's, when you got a tech that he has sometimes 15, I have techs that I talk to that tell me they got 20 something stops on their route that day. And I say, how is it that you're able, we're in the door and we're out the other end. I mean, there's none of that I see from the people that I talk to. I don't know how many people actually get to, I'm limited to about 6 to 8 stops a day in the field. That's what that's what we can, doing this is what you're talking about, talking to the client, inspecting, monitoring, doing all that. We can only do about 6 to 8 stops a day if they're spread out. We're in Miami, so, it's 20 minutes to get across a light. So
the thing is, we have a problem in the industry with the old paradigm of in and out, multiple stops. But a lot of that rests on one single thing, and that's pricing. We have incredibly undervalued what we do.
Yes.
And you can't do it. The gentleman I mentioned, who was a frustrated restaurant owner recently, I was sitting there looking at all this paperwork, and it was just 5 years worth of, for heaven's sakes, you got to be kidding me. And, and I simply went through it, and I was nice to everybody. I said, well, it looks like everybody's been doing exactly the same thing. And after going through the paperwork for a short period of time, I could identify certain technicians because they always use like 1.5 ounces of the same thing every month.
Right.
But the other technician used 1.7. Everybody has pet numbers, so they filled them in. And so obviously nothing much was happening. And the funny thing was, we talked about pricing, because obviously this man runs a business. And I said, I'm looking at this going, you've always paid between $90 and $110. It goes up and down, but that's always, and he said, yeah, I always wondered about that. And he said, the funny thing is, people come in and try to get my business because it's going to be $5 less a month. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense, does it? I said, it's all based on time. And he goes, well, explain that to me. Because he said, I know some of these companies will come in here for 15, 20 minutes on a night service. He said, we've actually left the restaurant, pest control showed up. And then when I drive by a few minutes later, having run to the store or something, the pest control truck's gone. And he figured that's what I get for $90, but I have to have it because the health department makes me. But it's not solving my problem. And he said, well, Jeff, how long should it take to service my restaurant? And I said, well, based on the size of your facility, it's going to take probably 3.5 to 4 hours a month if you make one visit. And his situation, that would have been adequate. And he said, well, how much did that cost? And I said, well, it's based on $125 an hour. And he said, whoa, wait a minute. He said, you're telling me that my pest problem will get better and somebody else will partner with me and it's only going to cost me $300 or $400? I said, yeah. He said, where do I sign up? He said, that's nothing. He said, I can't afford the health department shutting me down. That's nothing.
Yeah,
that's all the best.
I run into some customers that that will tell me that when I explain to them how long it actually takes. Just to give you an example, I just got a call from a brand that is an up and coming brand in the restaurant business in a specific category,
okay,
Mexican food. and they're on the beach. They're right on the beach. The facility is a 3-story facility, 12,000 square feet, with restaurant on all the food services on the first floor. Then everything else up top is offices, just offices, and
right.
But everything is in the bottom. They've got a massive roach problem, mostly American cockroach, rodent problems. And I'm talking to the owner, and they come in, they're charging $125 a month to do this. And I said to him, I can't do this for less than $375 a month. Every time my guy comes here, he's going to spend about 3 hours. I told the same exact thing that you just said is
right.
what I thought. And the attitude was, yeah, but I can't justify, because remember, this is not an individual owner. And here's what happens. They came in and sold it for and this is a national brand, sold it for $125 a month. I asked him, how long is he here? About 20, 25 minutes. Every month. And what does he do? He sprays. That's it. And I said, there's no way that we can do it. There's no way it can be done. It's impossible. Based on the size of this facility, just going through the offices on the initial service, we're going to be here for a minimum of about 4 hours with 2 guys doing this. And it was this attitude where, how do I justify now to management that I basically made a mistake. He made the base a decision on price and price alone to get this work done. And now he says, I can't tell them. I need you to, somehow rig the invoice to make it look like it's less and to figure it out, because I can't justify to them how I'm going to spend now $375 a month.
What you have now, see, and that may be an opportunity. I get situations like that where I get called by large companies and they want me to help them put together a pest control program. And, we tell them it's going to be expensive. Let's look at your budget. But when I sit down with an individual restaurant, one of the questions I always tell operators to ask right up front is, what type of a budget are you working with right now for pest control? Because if you think of it as just being pest control, they may not may not understand the importance of it. But the fact of the matter is, as a pest control operator, what you are is part of the team that protects the brand.
Right.
This is something I talked about years. I've talked about this for years. You are brand protection, because what is it going to cost when that cockroach runs across the table of a valuable restaurant client? That client is going to go out and tell all their friends, don't eat there. They have roaches, or they have rats, or they have flies, or whatever it might be.
Right.
But the brand protection budget is generally gigantic. And I can stand up and tell you, I've had this discussion with large companies in the United States, and I've seen, approvals done for certain types of pest control, for general pest control on facilities that were well in excess of $200,000 approved without a problem. It's all in how we present ourselves. And we devalue ourselves in this industry all the time. And there's no need for it.
Right.
But the other thing is, pest control operators, a lot of guys think they're not doing anything unless they're making an application. They think that their job is to go put something out. Put out a spray, put out a bait, put out a dust. They think that's their job, is making an application. Their job is keeping that facility pest-free.
Right.
Not applying chemical.
Well, yeah, whatever it takes to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mindset change. Now, I've seen some extremely successful pest control companies that have the attitude of, this is what it's going to take, this is what it's going to cost, and you can either hire us or go back to what you already have, which has been a failure for years. And some of those companies are small family businesses, And some of them have people waiting in line to become a customer.
Yeah.
They know they're going to pay a lot of money, but they're waiting in line hoping that this guy has an opening. and we could all be that way, which of course then elevates what we do to a much higher level, because what we do in pest control, we are a craft. That's the type of industry we are. And a craft has to be practiced in the field, and you get better and better and better the longer you do it, provided you look ahead, you are open to new ideas and new technologies. You're a craftsman. And if we have that attitude, I think we'd do better.
I think if I couldn't have said that better myself. That's one of the things that I always harp on is, if you think about, I always tell people, compare what we do to an electrician, to any other type of service company. A plumber charges minimum $90 an hour, and he charges you to come out whether he fixes anything or not.
Right.
Electricians charge, $150 to, something $100 an hour, and electricity hasn't changed any in 100 years. Nothing changes.
Nope, not much.
And plumbing hasn't changed. It's still, you do the same
nope,
thing.
You're bringing water into the building.
Pressure, volume, gravity hasn't changed. So, but with pest control, you have to be, every year you got to go get CEU training. Every year a new product comes out. Every year you have resistance issues. Here in South Florida, we get anywhere 2, 3, 12 insects a year that we have to deal with. The training and the certifications is never ending for us. I mean,
you have to stay sharp. Well, the one key thing that's helpful to remember in the pest control business is Mother Nature always wins. We fight a holding action. That's it. That's why the pest control industry is always going to have something to do, because Mother Nature always wins. Yeah. So what you're doing is fighting a holding action. You're kind of like the finger in the dike. The water ain't leaving.
Yeah.
And the pressure will always be there. I mean, we talk about things, for example, with rodents. We talk about rodent proofing. It's called patching holes so they don't get inside.
Right.
I mean, it's a matter of, you got to keep the pressure. You're not going to reduce the pressure sometimes because the outside pressure is massive. So what you have to do is protect it. And you protect it with a lot of different tools. You got pesticides, you've got patching and sealing, you've got cleaning, sanitation, maintenance, and product rotation, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
But
let's get into
let's help hold up the pressure.
Let's get into that. Let's talk about what's been your experience in that cleaning, sanitation. And then I also want to talk into that product rotation. People don't understand that in FIFO. It's more of an accounting term.
Well, with cleaning, sanitation, maintenance, and product rotation, it's actually pretty simple. Cleaning is removing things that are visible, and there's a lot that goes into that. You're cleaning up dirt and dust. You can see it. You're eliminating clutter. You can see it. You're throwing things away. You can see it. So cleaning is what you can see that you're going to remove. It's a cleaning process. Sanitation is after the cleaning. Sanitation is still cleaning, but you can't see the stuff. That's germs and microbes and all those other types of things we can't see, so we're sanitizing. It's kind of like, I guess a good comparison is a 3-part sink in a restaurant. The dishes go in the first sink and they're cleaned. Then they're rinsed, then they're sanitized.
Right.
So, that's how it works. So it's cleaning, sanitation, and then the maintenance part is repairing holes in the dike. It's making sure that things operate properly and don't create damage to the building, don't create leaks, don't create food sources. It is patching the holes. It is sealing the cracks. It is possibly putting on a new roof. That's maintenance. And then product rotation is real simple. And from years of food safety training, the other thing we used to call that is FIFO, first in, first out. So that we're not having old products on the shelf that are rotting back in the corner. Like when you go into that restaurant stockroom and you find out the general manager 2 years ago had a bunch of product he shoved in the corner, and then somebody else shoved a bunch of boxes in front of it. And there was all kinds of stuff breeding back in the corner. And it could have been stored product insects. I've found this recently at a facility where we opened up a warehouse area that had been locked and chained and bolted for probably years. Well, when they finally cut the locks off, we went inside. Holy jeez, did we find a rat problem breeding back there?
Ooh.
In stock that everybody claimed wasn't back there. Oh, there's nothing. Those are just empty areas. They've been sealed off for years, blah, 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 blah. And we went back in there, and there was a whole bunch of stock back in there that had been sitting there for decades. That's part of rotating.
Yeah.
Got to rotate it out.
Yeah, no, I don't run into too much of the stock product. Most of the time they're going to use it, or, it's gone. These places don't have. But the biggest problem I have is in cleaning and how they're cleaning, because they're cleaning they're cleaning their business the same way they clean their house, and they keep putting a wrench in my project.
Yeah, and sometimes they need some help there. And one of the things I recommend to pest control operators to do, I realize we may not have time to offer a cleaning service. Pest control companies traditionally run pretty lean. So you got X number of technicians for work that you have. A big extra job comes on, that's tough to take. But if you have a partnership in the city or town where you live with a good commercial cleaning company, then when you approach this client up front, you can bring them other expertise. Because sometimes at a restaurant, they're good at serving food and cooking food and everything else. They may not know a doggone thing about properly cleaning.
Right.
But sometimes a professional company can come in with you and do that, I call it restorative cleaning, and do that restorative cleaning and get them back to a place they can take care of it again. Because in a lot of cases, they do the best they know how to clean, but the place is just so far gone, or it's been so many years of buildup, they have no idea what to do. But you bring in a commercial cleaning company as a partner because you're part of the team that protects the brand, and you'll get it cleaned up. And the thing is, you're doing all this extra work as the pest control expert because these things need to be done. And they'll respect you for it, and you're making their life so much easier. They haven't got time to fix that stuff. And in some cases, they have plenty of money, but they don't know where to put it. And I've had that happen where, companies had plenty of money to work with, but they just didn't know where to apply it. They didn't have anybody to help them focus. Your job is providing the focus.
So most of what we do so far that we've talked about has nothing to do with pesticides. It's almost all on the front end side of preventing, consulting, understanding.
The thing is that the pesticide portion of this, that's part of the issue is, as I said earlier, we think of ourselves as applicators. Now, obviously, we want to leave something behind, but we want to leave something behind that causes as little harm to anything except our target pest as possible. And there's plenty of ways to do that well. And do we have to reapply something to these areas every single month or 5 times a month? No, we may not need to do that at all. But we need to have a presence there on a regular basis to be sure the client is still protected and they've not been penetrated in any manner or fashion. So the pesticides are part of it, but they're not all of it. Right. But they're just a part of it. And we are going to leave something behind because, we can't be standing there with a fly swatter at the door. So we leave pesticides behind in the wall voids and things like this. And there's plenty of very good application equipment to do that with. And we make those proper applications, and then we just keep an eye on things. And we look for the vulnerabilities. We've opened the communication channels. So if somebody sees anything, because we cannot control introduction. That's really tough to do. And bed bugs have certainly taught everybody how valuable that fact is. We can't really do a lot with introduction. However, what we can do is prevent infestation, so that when something does come in, we've got something waiting there to deal with it before that introduction becomes an infestation. Right.
What do you tell a client? Because I'm in a different, my client and me, by doing this intentionally, I've weeded out everybody else that doesn't want what we have. I pretty much excluded everybody that doesn't want what we have. But the majority of the industry is in the mindset of the client, where if you show up and you don't apply something in the customer's mind, you didn't do your job. And I guess the industry has to go through, we talk about IPM and integrated pest management, and we talk about it. Some people have never even heard of it. They're listening to this podcast for the first time, and they've been in the business and they don't understand integrated pest management. How is
integrated pest? It's not that complicated a process. I mean, there was I've talked to folks where they thought IPM, that meant we weren't going to use any pesticides, or weren't going to use any chemicals or something. All that IPM is a menu. It's a menu of choices. And integrated pest management means that you have many, many more things to offer the client besides just a squirt of this or a little bit of dust or some bait. Because integrated pest management takes all the things that need to be done to deal with a pest issue and puts it into a menu. And then you, as the expert coming in, open up that menu for the client and make the choices appropriate to their location. That's how it's done. That's IPM.
Yeah, I think. What do you think? What do you think? Where do you inside this? But it seems like the industry itself, in the age of information, the industry, all the information coming out of integrated pest management this is what frustrates me as a guy who's in the business, who is out in the field and is trying to educate his client, that in the age of information, the universities are putting out tons of material on IPM, on integrated pest management. But yet the industry itself, those who are the top, let's say the top 100 accounts, the top 100 pest control companies in the country, I talk to customers every single day on a daily basis, and I talk to them about this concept of integrated pest management, of how less is more, how it's all about finding the insect. And it doesn't seem like the education system that is supposed to be training us and the industry itself is on the same page.
Well, I don't know, because I know a lot of training directors and people around the country.
Okay.
And a lot more are really into the process of doing things in the IPM manner that I just described. But what it really comes down to, though, is the lady or gentleman sitting behind the wheel of that truck.
Okay.
Because if they aren't trained to manage their time properly, and they're not given the equipment and the process time to do the job, it will fail. It's going to fail. And that's maybe we lose it there, because we have to also make up in a lot of cases for times in the past, and we still have to make up. There's no way that you can take a $600 a month restaurant and service it for $100 and satisfy anybody, and yet there's an awful lot of those still in existence out there.
Right. And
those poor technicians are just they're treading water. I mean, they're treading water on that route trying to survive.
Right.
And it's because it's been priced in such a fashion that they have to make a living. And the pay system for many technicians is part of the issue, because they're paid production pay. And then on top of that, though, sometimes they get an extra service call, but they're not getting production pay for the extra service call. So if they get a whole bunch of extra services on a time-strained route, you're going to have problems, and that's when you go in and pick the account up for more money.
Yeah, let me. So, what do you think that as a guy who's out there, who is talking to these high-level clients, dealing with large companies, what can be done? What practical thing could be done to elevate the pest control industry to a level where people see us as the real professionals that we have to be in order to make this happen? I mean, that's just a burning question for me.
It all boils down to the partnership side, because where I have seen the solid partnerships created with the communication that needs to be done, I've seen it be successful for years and years and years. The other thing that seems to help is if you're servicing facilities, say it's chain facilities or something like that, you set up a base rate for service, and you put some of the price controls right into the hands of the client and base those price controls on the conditions that are conducive to pest in the facility. So in other words, you've got a store say they have a big chain of stores, they have a base rate of X. Somebody's going to come in, they're going to spend a prescribed amount of time. Normally a service may take, say, an hour and a half, 2 hours. They're going to do the service profile, do the investigations required, and go ahead and say, good, we're at this point in time on this service, we're good, and go on to the next account. Now, if there's conditions conducive to pests inside of that facility that are causing infestations, instead of a pest control company getting beaten to death with extra services, what happens is the client, by terms of contract, pays for an additional service call that month. Maybe they pay for weekly service, they pay for service every week, whatever. But every time that somebody comes back out, there's an additional service charge until the conditions conducive to the pest are taken care of. In other words, until the cleaning, sanitation, and maintenance is taken care of.
That's awesome.
That puts the price controls right in the hands of the client. They know what their base rate is. They know if they do their job keeping that facility up, it's X amount of dollars. However, if the facility is not kept up, and that causes the pest control operator to come out repeatedly because there's so many holes in the dike, then the operator is compensated for that. When the repairs and everything are done, site management, pest control operator verifies indeed these things have been completed, it rotates back to the single service. That's one way to do it. And I have seen that process work successfully for periods up to a couple of decades with clients.
No, that's very good, because I hadn't thought about that.
Because that's called a rampable service. And it's not a common thing within the pest control industry, but when you have an educated client that understands you're part of the brand protection team, a rampable service can be proposed that is frankly wonderful for everybody involved, because the client gets to control their costs because they keep the facilities in shape the way they should be.
Right.
And the operator is there as part of the monitoring to make sure it's kept up. So suddenly it really does become more than just spraying bugs. It becomes part of the team that protects the brand. That's the way the process should be done.
Yeah. No,
but like I said, I've seen that work very, very successfully.
No, I think that is, as a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I've got a bunch of in the pipeline that we've got that we've estimated and we've gone out, and we're going to put that into action immediately where we're going to, we do a facilities inspection. I said, if you get this done, then this will be your price. And if not, then you will end up paying us every time we have to cut, because you will call us because this isn't done. And I think the client then can choose, how much he wants.
It all comes back to what I told you earlier. It's all about the partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is, that's definitely the vital, where, we do that. I've done that for years in our L&O business, because these customers want beautiful landscapes and they don't want anything to go wrong. So, we put, I get to the point where I put locks on the irrigation system so the landscaper can't change it, because he'll come in and he'll see yellow lawn and he says, oh, it needs more water, and he messes with it. And I partner with the client where I say, look, if you see a stain on that lawn, you need to call me right away because something went wrong.
Yeah, because what you have is a partnership.
Yeah. And
the thing is, a good partnership, there's highs and there's lows, but there's always communication. And a good partnership stays together. A number of years ago, when I worked for, our company was at Bugsberger/Prism. Prism was owned by Johnson Wax, and I remember the old timers up at Johnson Wax always would tell us that long-term relationships with clients are just like a long-term marriage. It lasts because they communicate.
Yeah.
Really important. The communication piece is really important.
No, I totally agree. Well, Jeff, is there anything that you would like to talk about that I didn't ask you that, you thought maybe, I should have asked or has come up in your mind about this whole process and everything is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have asked you, so that you can share with the audience about anything that you think is really, really important in this whole process and this whole thing, and that, you wish you would have been asked?
The thing is, the 12 key factors as a whole is a lot like a really big onion. And as you peel off more layers, there's more underneath waiting for you. And as you work with the 12 key factors and get that into your mindset, you'll find it applies to so much. But ultimately, what it was really designed to do was to get that partnership solidified so that people could communicate effectively. And I never really worried so much about specific pesticides or anything like that, because there's an awful lot of good products on the market. And I've tried to find products that make sense, being, I guess, what you would call greener than other ones, or far more effective, where we didn't have to worry about endangering people or pets or something like that. In other words, material is good for sensitive environments. But the real key, beyond anything else, is the communication and the partnership. And then you fold in the proper tools, and you're going to be effective at pest control. It'll work. And then, of course, processes are a big part of that, but the 12 key factors kind of lays that out. And as I said earlier, when it comes to treatments and such, spray, fog, bomb, bait, trap, and fumigate, those are tools.
Right.
That we use.
No,
And as far as the processes of pest control, basically what we use to kill things are heat, cold, chemical, and mechanical processes. So it's heat, cold, fume, chemical, and mechanical. I break fumigation out because it's a little bit more than just putting out spray. So it's heat, cold, fume, chemical, and mechanical processes. Those are the tools that we use. And you can fill in what works best in the environment where you are.
Right. No, makes total sense. Very applicable, very actionable on behalf of the technician. I think it's very, very, that's the key to it. Make it actionable. Jeff, if somebody wants to, cause you do training per PCOs.
Yes.
Okay. So,
that's right.
So you're, I know you're doing a couple of events coming up. Talk to us about those events. What's going on?
Well, coming up right now, I'm going to be doing a training class in Tennessee for Univar.
Okay.
And that's actually the end of this week.
Okay.
And then the next event coming up after that, I'll be up for the New Jersey Pest Control Association, and I'll be just representing a few clients at that meeting for the New Jersey Clam Bake.
Okay.
And then after that, we start rolling into September. then that kind of starts up pest control season. We have meetings in Arkansas. We have the ICE event coming up in Orlando in the end of September.
Okay.
And so I'll be up there for ICE, which is I've never been to one of those, and I found out about it actually talking to Frischman.
Okay.
And he mentioned it to me, and I checked into it. So I've got a few clients that want me to bring some of their items there at a booth at ICE. We're expecting 7,000 attendees, I believe, in Orlando for a meeting that hasn't taken place in the United States since the 70s, and they only do this meeting once every 4 years.
Yeah, wow.
But it's going to be it's going to be big. I mean, NPMA is going to be half the size of the ICE meeting.
Yeah, I was shocked by it because I looked into it. I said, man, I would like to go. And then I looked at the price and I said, maybe not this time. It is pretty pricey to go. It's like $1,200 for the conference.
Yeah.
For all these entomologists from all over. What is it? From all over the country they're meeting?
Actually, it's a worldwide event.
Okay.
So you have the International Congress of Entomology, is my understanding, along with the ESA folks, all meeting in Orlando, and it starts on the 25th of September.
Right.
And so it's going to be a beast. And then after that, we have things like NPMA in Seattle in October.
Right.
And then, we have some other meetings in October. And then going into November, you have the Kentucky Short Course, and that's up in Lexington. Mm-hmm. And right on the tail of the Kentucky Short Course, you have the ever popular New York City Pest Expo, which is on Veterans Day.
Okay.
And that is a wild event in New York City. I mean, that's a one-day pest control event, and the roof comes off the building. That is one wild event.
Wow. I'm going to see if I wanted to go to Expo, and I might be able to do that and take some vacation time too and go out there and go to Expo.
Well, I was going to say, you mean the New York City Pest Expo?
Yeah.
That one? Yeah, that meeting, it's sponsored by Andy Linares, and he owns the Bug Off Pest Control Center, which is the big distributor of pest control products in New York City.
Uh-huh.
And that meeting is unbelievable because you'll have upwards of maybe 500 or so pest control operators from the New York City area. And those guys are unbelievable. They have so much energy.
Yeah.
Those guys they're going 60 and a 30 all the time.
Yeah.
Lord, is that a fun meeting?
Yeah, no, that'll be fun. I'm thinking I might be able to do that and get some time off and go and meet some people over there.
It's at the DoubleTree by Hilton in Fort Lee.
Okay.
It's on Veterans Day in Fort Lee, and it's the location is right at the western edge of the George Washington Bridge. As soon as you go over the bridge, there's the DoubleTree by Hilton. That's where he's holding it this year.
Got it. And let me say, because you're the pest coach and you do pest control. If somebody wants to hire you and bring you in to do coaching for their company or whatever, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, they can always call my cell, which is handy. Everybody on the planet seems to have that number, and that's 770-331-4348. That's 770-331-4348. They can certainly shoot me a text, or they can use my email address, which is pretty easy. It's my name, Jeffrey McGovern, @mindspring.com.
Okay. And you got a website?
Yeah, the website, I honestly need to get back in there and do some cleaning on it, because when my Windows 7 computer was forcibly put into Windows 10, I'm still trying to recover from that. I mean to tell you, that just that was devastating as far as being able to keep up with everything, and I'm just now getting that all put back together.
No problem.
But it was jeffmcgovern.com.
Jeffmcgovern.com.
That site is still up, but I've just got to get it. I've got to get in there and do some cleaning.
No problem. Hey, Jeff, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for all the time. Thank you for this. Hope we can do this soon again, and maybe after you get all done your traveling through the summer and the fall, we can get back together again and.
Well, you never know. I might be down there. I've got a couple of visits coming up down in your neck of the woods, so I may just give you a shout. We can go out and have lunch one day.
Sounds awesome.
All right, man.
All right. Have a great one.
Take care, and good talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Too. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting PestGeekPodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.